Hello, humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. You know, of all the things that I had on my bingo card, Karl Jobst getting clowned by the judge wasn't one of them. It wasn't, and it's Friday now. I turned in a few papers. My final is due on Monday, so I have a lot of writing to do, but I wanted to take a break, help out with the dishes over here, and just, think about this. Because I never saw this coming, right? I knew that Billy Mitchell had a pretty good chance of succeeding. I thought they would, have some sort of split. That was what I thought. I thought he had a lot better chances of succeeding because he had just have a better team. When you read Ertzkat's blog on Perfect Pac-Man, which I still have to go over his last post, just from the way he was frustrated, what he was describing in court on an everyday basis, you could see that Karl Jobst was just getting out lawyered, that lawyers for Billy Mitchell were just better prepared. But at the end of it, I want you to think about this. This judge is giving Karl Jobst the worst of news, the worst possible news, right? And on top of not winning anything, because he didn't win anything, they can't spend anything. That's why the appeal, in my point of view, and I'm no lawyer, would be so hard to get, because this judge really took into account his words online and how he acted towards the court system, where he was just thinking that this was a slam dunk, that he knew the law better. He was saying, that he, Billy Mitchell doesn't know Australian law, and that could be true. That's why he hired very good lawyers, but neither did Karl Jobst. And he should have hired better lawyers. The smugness came back to bite him, the overconfidence, where, we talked about this, where he thought, I could just pay less. And the things that he said afterwards, when he was already in legal proceedings, and he's still, going on Camelot saying that he's not going to be a good winner, that he's going to make 100 more videos, as he's never going to let Billy forget this, came back to bite him in the form that the judge clowned his ass by making fun of him. What do you say? He was going to slay the dragon and his lance wasn't strong enough? Is that a metaphor? Is he trying to say that he has a limp dick? Jeez. You can take it any form of ways. Now, when I was thinking about it, I was saying, well, maybe there is an appeal there, because most judges don't go to the extent of clowning the loser. Clowning the loser while they're giving him the worst news. You would think that telling a person, hey, you're about to pay maybe $1.5 million Australian dollars would be bad news enough, right? Not only did you lose the case, you got to pay for lawyers too. That's horrible news. So you would think a judge would be more measured, like, in giving that type of news. Like, dude, you lost everything. You came in here, I listen to your videos where you're all confident, extra confident, and you're telling everybody why you're going to win. Then you come here in court and you're sobbing like a bitch. And then you present this weak ass sauce defense, incoherent, unprepared, and all this stuff. But with such bad news, you would think, well, I'm not going to give this guy the coup de grace, but he did. Right? He did. On top of telling him that he's going to lose the case, he's making fun of the guy. Because that's the only way you could take it. It might be really polite the way he put it. Right? It could be like the most elegant clowning in a courtroom that you've ever seen. But still, it's clowning. It's clowning. And that I really didn't have in my bingo cards. And that's why it's so hard. And a lot of the people that were supporting Karl now that they're seeing this, they're like, I feel deceived. And as I told you, that this case ended up not being about cheating, but it did start out that way. The lawyers made some maneuverings there to change what the original filings were, what have you. But in the end, he still lost. But they're out as saying, hey, I feel defrauded. That's why I was on the wrong side of history there. I don't know if it's to make themselves feel better. But, I still have to go through Ertzkat's last blog. We were following that. I started from 0 and I posted every day. I'm going to try to do a playlist, guys. I try to do one for this series here. I'm going to put it all together and include those posts out there, because that really gives you a flavor of what was going on in the courtroom. A lot of people are making videos on it now, especially bigger YouTube channels, and they're just stating an opinion of the result, but they weren't there through the journey. Nobody reported it better, in my point of view, than Ertzkat, and he's a Karl Jobst supporter, right? He was all in for Karl, and he was seeing the mistakes in real time, not only when he was in the courtroom, but afterwards, when he was hearing the closing arguments and watching these guys screw up in real time. He was reacting to it. And his fears, his worst fears, came out to be true. Something that Karl led people to believe was going to be an easy slam dunk was anything but. It was the complete opposite of a slam dunk. Right? You could say, okay, he just lost the case. That would be the opposite. No, it's even further than that. You lost the case so bad that the judge was making fun of you. That's how bad it went for this man. That I didn't have in my bingo card. I don't know anybody out there that said that it was going to be so bad for this guy that he was going to lose everything, and on top of that, the judge was going to clown him. That was a real surprise. Could that be, maybe an issue for somebody make an appeal and say, well, the judge had bias or whatever? Well, yeah, I mean, if you watch Karl videos, you're going to have bias, saying this guy was telling people that this is about cheating when it wasn't. And even the judge said, I'm not here to judge whether Billy Mitchell cheated at Donkey Kong or not. That's not the question in front of me. And, at the end of the day, Karl's not only a loser in the eyes of the public, but he's a loser in the eyes of the court, not in a client that just lost a case, but in a guy that thinks too high of himself, that has a huge ego, that is not willing to say, I made a mistake and I was wrong and I corrected this. If anything, at the end of the day, you would have thought he would be saying these things about Billy Mitchell because that's his claim to fame, as being the villain and being arrogant. And even with all that, the judge is saying this about him. Can you believe? I mean, that's why I didn't have, if you were to ask me if the judge described this scenario and you asked me, who was he saying this about? Was he saying this about Karl Jobst if I didn't know anything? Or was he saying this about Billy Mitchell? I would have said, well, it's probably about Billy Mitchell because, he has the fame for having the biggest ego. No, after the evidence, it was Karl. Wow. I didn't have that in my bingo card. That is going to be hard for him to live down in the courtroom law. When a lawyer that he asked to review the case starts reading this shit, What do you think, these judges don't talk about themselves? You don't think this judge is going around the corner going, you're not going to believe this case. Let me tell you about this guy. So even if he doesn't get the same judge, he gets another judge, he's going to say, hey, aren't you the guy with the broken lance? Aren't you the limp dick guy? Jeez. What a terrible situation. Oh, man, there's more to talk about, but I got to finish the dishes first. And then Then we'll talk some more about it after I get my homework laid out for the weekend. All right, guys, I will catch you on the next one. Take care.